Have you ever heard it said that money is the root of all evil? Today, we're not really going to start talking about how many verses in the Bible are misquoted, misrepresented, and completely misunderstood by the church and the world around us. But today, I do want to talk a little bit about what money actually is. Its problems, its pros, its cons, and really a way of thinking, a philosophy about money that can help you. Maybe if you have a lot of money, if you don't have a lot of money, wherever in that spectrum you fall, that you will have a better idea of how to approach it and how to guard yourself against certain pitfalls that come with money, and how to prepare yourself to be a good steward of the funds and the power, really, that God gives us. This is the For Your Life and Godliness podcast, the podcast that takes the Word of God and puts it down into the grit of your real life, where you can actually use it. I am your host, as always, Pastor Will. And as I said today, we want to talk a little bit about money. We'll be right back after this. Money is one of the most misunderstood ideas and concepts, I think, when it comes to the church and the world in general. I mean, most people believe that having more money's better, less money's bad. And then on the flip side, they always see people with more money as bad and people who have less money as good. So the world kind of contradicts itself in how it thinks about money and people who have it. Everybody thinks that they're cool when they have money, but they don't think other people having money is right. And it just goes around in this kind of circular reasoning that doesn't ever end up ever really making sense. And as Christians, we have been given the principles of the Bible for real life, right? That's the whole podcast. That's what it's about. It's about real life. And money is one of the most realest things that you can possibly be involved with, because it affects so much of our lives. Everything in our life is affected by money because we live in a society, generally speaking, that doesn't provide its own materials. Right? Most of us don't grow our own food. We don't sew our own clothes. We don't build our own vehicles. We don't build our own houses for the most part. And even if you do, you don't go out in the woods, generally speaking, and cut down all your own trees if you build your own house. You definitely don't go and mine your own ore to smelt it down and put it into a cast and build a car out of it, or an engine block or anything like that, right? We have to have money somewhere along the line. No matter how off the grid you think you are, money somewhere along the line becomes a necessity of our lives. Even to get off the grid and say that you were completely self-sufficient, in order to get started in that and to get to that point, you needed money, right? Money is a piece of our lives that is inescapable. It's just a reality that we have to accept. And so the Bible gives us the principles on how to deal with wealth, riches, money, whatever, whether it's a little or it's a lot. It has instructions for both ends of the spectrum and how we should treat those things. And I'm not going to cover every single idea of money today. I do want to address first, before we even get started, that what I quoted earlier is completely wrong, because it is never said in the Bible that money is the root of all evil, but that the love of money is the root of all evil. In fact, what it says the love of money. Actually, let's go back a little ways here, right? It says that, where are we going here? Where are we going? Verse 6 of chapter 6 in 1 Timothy says, godliness with contentment is great gain. So that's a principle of life that, regardless of what economic strata you're in, this should be your mode of thinking, right? Contentment with godliness. If I have a lot, I should be content. If I have little, I should be content. And though I don't believe anybody, at least in this society, because of the access, should stay in a place where they have absolutely nothing, or they're in debt, or they're all those other things, because I don't believe that's a good witness for Christ either. It does in other places. It says to him, and it says, let him who stole steal no more, but work with his hands honestly, and so that he has something to give to others who have nothing. And so the model, I believe, of Christianity is that as we actually apply the principles in real life, that we begin to gain, but not for my own necessarily enrichment, though I am given everything, all things richly to enjoy. It also says it is also not just for me to enjoy personally, but to give to others. And actually giving, as Jesus said, Paul quotes Jesus, which I'm not sure where he's quoting from because it's never actually seen. So it must have been something that Jesus kind of just said and was never actually recorded by anybody else. But it says that it is more blessed to give than it is to receive, which is true. I mean, I love if I have opportunity to give. And the less I have, the less opportunity I have to give. And Paul says that those who used to steal need to work. And it says to the point that you are able to give to those who are in need. And it should be a cycle of lifting people up from their spots of needs, and then that person should give to somebody else, right? That's a kind of underlying principle of really the gospel, is receiving riches that we are then able not only to enjoy for ourselves, but give to others. That's the message of the gospel. We are, and it says that Christ made himself poor that he may make us rich. In that case, he was using the idea of money and treasure and value to picture what we've received in salvation. And that when I receive the riches of Christ, it's not just for me, but it's for me to give away to other people. And he's using the idea of money to kind of picture that, obviously. And so money being the basic bottom level of that illustration, the principle still applies. As I gain in this life monetarily, the most carnal, worthless things like money, then I ought to be willing, more than willing, to also share that with others. In fact, some of the only differences when communicating to those who had riches in this world that the apostles kind of laid out in front of us was that those who had the goods of this world be ready to give to others as needs arose. And to be essentially that if you had means or riches, you should be willing to give, to be generous. Generosity is also the center of the gospel. It is because of God's generosity in giving the riches of his son to us that we even have salvation in the first place. And so that should carry over in the most basic everyday life strata, however, that's a really weird word to say. I don't know why I said strata. Strata? I don't know how that's, now my mind can't recall how to say that word properly. Anyways, whatever level of economy that you are in, he gives us principles for those things. And if we're in a top part of that, we ought to be willing to give to others and to help lift them up as needs arise. It's not talking about governmental welfare. It's talking about individual responsibility. As you walk through your life, you come across people. And as you do that, and as you're spending your personal time in prayer, Bible study, and communication with God and communion with God, that you will come across people that will need your help. And you'll know that that's a person I personally should help. And it's a choice you make. And then you can find out what their need is and you give to them. And so this isn't talking about welfare. It's not talking about communism. It's not talking about any of those kind of, or redistribution of wealth or any of those kind of things. It's talking about individual responsibility of each person, whatever means they may have, to give to others. That goes all the way up to the highest value of things, which is the gospel itself and the eternal life, and all the way to the most basic minimum things of carnal money, as Paul says. If I reaped, if I sowed spiritual things, how he's basically saying, if I planted spiritual things in y'all's lives, how is it that I should not reap carnal things? And he's talking about support, and not having to, to scratch his living off rocks, as it were. Even though he says, I never use those things. And I know I'm quoting something I haven't listed off here verse-wise. I'm just like, things come in my mind. I can't remember the reference to it. Anyways, the Bible has a lot to say about money and how we treat it, and how we treat the idea of gaining and losing, and generosity and giving and greed and covetousness, right? Those things are all in there. It's not something we hear a lot about. We don't really hear a lot of messages about greed. We don't really hear a lot of messages about covetousness. And yet, it is one of the main things we see in the world around us today. So how should we think about money, and how should we approach it? And today, as I said, I don't want to get into every kind of thing, but as I plan for my family's future, and I think about things I would like to leave behind, The Bible also says in Proverbs 13:22 that a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. And so that's always stuck out to me for a long time. And that's really convicted me about the way that I looked at my money, the way I treated money, or didn't treat it, in the way that I, might not have looked at it properly and not have been a good steward of it. And so the plans I have in place today, as long as, society continues in some kind of modicum of normalcy, which is doubtful at this point, but if it does, and I grow old and my daughters grow up, get married and all those kind of things and have their own children, then my goal is to leave not only them, but also their children something. And that would require, among other things, money, and quite a bit of it, because I have 5 daughters. So that would be quite a bit of money to leave behind. And obviously that inheritance is not only monetary, we're talking about spiritual things as well, but reality is that money is also a part of that. And so I want to be able to do those things. And so the plans I have required me to, at some point in my life, invest and gain and an interest of money in my life. And so as I looked at that today, and it just crossed my mind out of nowhere, God began to convict me, or really just reveal to me, the kind of principles I would have to remember and kind of put in place if I were ever to come across the kind of wealth that I desire to build and leave behind me, to my family as well as to other people. And that's one of my biggest desires, especially when it comes to amassing, I guess, money or wealth, is to be able to help other people in situations that I have been in myself. And nobody, as it says, kind of like for the prodigal son, not talking about me being prodigal, but, it says that he was in need or want and nobody gave unto him. And I've been at that place. I mean, I've been in places of deep need and have nobody give. And it's just something that you have to go through and experience. And if I come across that kind of situation, I would love to be able to do something. And it can be simple things, that we do in our life, but I want to be generous. Not just in my time, not just in my ministry, but also my money into carnal things as well as the spiritual things. And so this is what today, as I was sitting here editing a video for Thrive and for our student ministry, and for whatever reason flashed across my mind like, I don't know, like a ticker. It's just like, it's like, you guys who are listening to this can't see what I just did, but it just flashed across my mind out of nowhere. And I just want to say this. The number one thing that money is, people say money's the root of all evil. Well, no, it's the love of money that is the root of all evil, right? And so it said there, I forgot that I was quoting this. I got off on a tangent. Godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into this world, certainly we can carry nothing out, and having food and raiment, there let us be content, right? But they that will be rich will fall into temptations or testings and snares, and many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition, which is another word for destruction. And then he goes on and says, he could have followed up with money is the root of all evil, but he doesn't. He says, the love of money is the root of all evil, which some have coveted after. They have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. And we can see that in the world today, people who gain money, and especially if it's gained hastily, as Proverbs says, it ends up being their own, to their own downfall, their own detriment. But as talking about that, there's danger in riches, but not in the money itself, but it's in the love of money. And for someone to love money, it says there that they coveted after those things. What the money has done is not cause someone to turn evil or to become evil, but rather it has revealed something of character that was in them already. And really, money, when you have to think about it, you have to think that it is, and this is what came to me today, money is a magnifier. It magnifies what is already existing. It magnifies already existing characteristics. So, What does that mean? How do you use that idea, that thought process? Because it's not the money itself, it's the love of it, it's the covetousness. It's a character flaw within ourselves that allows money to corrupt us. Because that's another thing. It's not a quote from the Bible, but it sounds like it because people say it so much, that money corrupts, right? But money does not corrupt. It only reveals, it only digs up character flaws, desires, lusts, and problems that already exist but didn't have the power or the way or the avenue to reveal themselves or to present themselves to us. Okay? So if you're in a place like I am, where you desire to build a foundation of wealth, to kind of break out of a cycle that you're born into or whatever, and you want to leave to your children more than what was left to you or whatever it might be, you have to also understand that wealth and money are some of the most dangerous things that you could ever want or wish for. And so it's like handling fire, where when it's in the right proper place, it's a great thing. It's life-saving. The world doesn't move without some sort of combustion or fire in some way, that release of energy. But it is also extremely dangerous if not contained properly, not put in the right place, not channeled the right way. And so money is the same way. And as I said, it's really just going to magnify what already exists. And so lust becomes lasciviousness, which is just uncontrolled, wanton lust, right? Laziness becomes more lazy. Greed becomes more greedy. Love becomes more loving. Industry becomes more industrious. Generosity becomes more generous. More money will simply magnify what you already are. How you use that practically in your life, especially as I said, you're at the bottom, you're trying to grow into a place where you're able to be a good man who leaves an inheritance behind him. If you're trying to do that, you have to be aware that if God were to answer your prayers for these sort of things, that you today, when you have nothing, need to develop strong, biblical, really holiness of character in your life. Because if you don't build it now, I know a lot of people are like, well, I'd be more generous to have more money. I would give more if I had more money. I'd do this, do that, do whatever, But reality is, whatever you do today when you have little is what you will do when you have much. It only magnifies. It is a multiplier. It is a lever. Money is a lever that allows you to do more of what you already desire to do in the first place. If you're already a person who is lustful and you're in your poverty are viewing pornographic sites, or you're having illicit relationships or texting relationships, I guarantee you, it might be in the background, you may think it doesn't hurt anybody, but were you to come into a good amount of money, those things that are hidden would become seen. 1,000%. This is why most people, when they obtain the kind of wealth that everybody seems to want, they end up going off the deep end, because they don't realize that what they're doing today in small things or in hidden things, when they don't have a whole lot of access or power to do as what money provides for people, that those things will actually come out more then. And you will not magnify good things if you don't already, you're not already cultivating a good, base of personality and character in the first place, which obviously comes from the Word of God. But most people don't think about those things that way. They don't think about money that way. And so I wrote this down kind of for myself. Obviously, this is kind of a brain dump, so just kind of bear with me here. But I wrote this down for myself to kind of keep in mind. Take care what character you cultivate in the valley, because it will be revealed on the mountaintop for all to see. And this is why people go off the deep end when they come into money or power or position. I mean, money is simply power. It, like I said, it's a lever, it's strength. It allows you to do more of what you're already doing. I mean, any business knows that more capital means more ability to go out and do more jobs, or do more jobs more efficiently. And it's the old proverb, it takes money to make money. Well, that's because money multiplies the efforts you're putting in. And so if you can multiply your efforts, you can also multiply your income. And that's why a little bit of money at the beginning put in the right places will will multiply, and that's where that whole principle comes in. But your money is always going to be that multiplier, that magnifier of what you are. So as you're in the bottom rung and you're trying to climb up, you need to pay attention to the kind of character that you're building, which is why greed, covetousness, and trying to slice everybody else's throats as you're on the way up the ladder, trying to steal money and those kind of things never actually works out, because what you're doing is creating a character that cannot sustain or handle that kind of wealth. And God is the one who gives the power to gain wealth, is what God told Israel in the Old Testament. And so we know he gives it to us for a reason. We know he gives it to us to be generous to other people. But those things, just knowing that in our minds, not enough. We have to cultivate a character that takes into account that whatever I am in private, in the valley, when I have nothing, will be magnified when I'm on the top and I have a lot of money or a lot of power or a lot of position. And as I said, money is just simply power, and position is power, and it comes in different forms. But when you are set on high, what you were when no one saw you will just be multiplied and magnified up there. It's like Joshua. Let's just use him as a good example, because I feel like I'm getting off base here and maybe I'm not making my point clear enough. Joshua, throughout his life, before Moses dies, is always seen being faithful, just being the guy, second man, second row, in the background, but always faithful, right? When you see Moses go up to the mountain, it's Joshua who is waiting, right? In the valley, 40 days seemed to be forever for those people, to the point where they actually left God and built a golden calf for themselves and did all that jazz with Aaron. And to them, it seemed like it was forever. And yet to Joshua, when Moses comes down from the mountain, he finds Joshua exactly where he left him. So he's faithful in the small little things. It goes to the principle, I think I already did this in another podcast, that those who are faithful in the least are faithful also in the greatest. Those unfaithful in the least are unfaithful also in the greatest. And money is one of those things that, out of everything, will reveal exactly who's faithful in little things and who's faithful and who's not faithful in the little things. And so later on, you find Joshua standing with Caleb, still second man. Caleb's the speaker, probably because Caleb was older, and Joshua may have been his partner. I don't know. Maybe Joshua and Caleb were partners as they went out there, and Caleb being the older one and standing before 1.5 million people and telling them that they're wrong and telling them things that they didn't want to hear. Joshua stands with him in that cause. And he's faithful in little things. And then one day, Moses passes off the scene, and God turns to Joshua, knowing that he could entrust him with the leadership of 1.5 million-ish people. Not because he was inherently this guy here, and God all of a sudden I never thought about Joshua. Now Moses is gone. I need to find a replacement. No, the entire time, he was proving that he was going to be able to handle that. And it's the same thing with money. And it's going to be the same thing with a lot of things, with position, power, money, authority, with your family, with your job, with if you create a business or own a job, or if you're over people. Every time that you are scooted up the ladder, as it were, you get seen more and more. Very good picture. You're being elevated as you go up the ladder, and you get seen more and more, and your flaws are seen more and more, and they're magnified more and more. Money is no different. So you have to take care what kind of character you have, because money will multiply that and magnify that. And if you want to be a good man who leaves an inheritance to his kids and his kids' kids, then you need to take care that you don't allow your poor character to destroy that opportunity, because it's not just about you. As I said, in my case, my whole desire, I guess, for wealth is not necessarily for me, but it's what I can do and give to my wife, and then to my kids, and then to their kids after them. That's what the Bible teaches. That's what we ought to be focused on as a parent. That should be, your goal. You may not be able to leave millions of dollars or whatever. At the bare minimum, you need to be leaving a spiritual legacy to people, but at the most, you ought to be leaving also the worldly things that they will need to set them apart, that allows them to be more equipped to service and serve other people, right? As I give And I serve others as an example and save for them. And then I set their lives up so they're not starting out in debt. So they're not having to work and kill themselves to get by. And what they have a little bit extra, they've seen my example. They have something to set them apart in their lives as they get started so that they're also able to go out and help other people more. And then they repeat the process. It's the same exact principle you see in salvation with witnessing. It's the same thing it should be with your money, because you're building the same character. It's the character of looking forward, of being generous, of showing that as an example and laying up as a good steward, taking care of all the things God's given you. And when you think about the basic things of money like that, it takes away a lot of the propensity to lean towards greed and covetousness, because now it's not like I'm just trying to amass money for myself. It's like I'm thinking decades into the future for somebody else other than myself. And when you do that, you can, I think, better guard against the things that will cause you to kind of topple down that mountain top after you gain that wealth. And so, as I said, this is just a principle. Hopefully this made sense as I went through it. This is why, as I said, many people we think are well-meaning when they get in positions of power and money actually fall off, because somewhere in the background, though it looked good on the outside, they were really just wearing a mask. They never built good character in the valley when they were down low. And so when they get lifted up and they're given a position to preach or to teach or to lead a company maybe they come into money somehow, they just crash and they burn. Their hidden personal life was cultivating a character that was negative, that was sinful really, and it was just looking for a place to come out. And the money gives that opportunity. And so money does not corrupt. It only reveals what was already there. And if that is true and you want money, you have to be cultivating a character that is not covetous, that's not greedy, that is generous, that is loving, that is caring, that is forward thinking, that is thinking generationally, that's looking down the road, not just for yourself, but for your family, and then beyond your family for those people that you're around that you can help. As you become more generous, then God will give you more things as you grow, respectively, I should say, because everything's relative. I mean, wealth here in this country is different from wealth maybe in another country. It's relative speaking, but this principle can be applied no matter what country you live in, no matter where you're at. Whatever level you can get to, that's where you should be going. And so instead of thinking about money corrupting, think about money revealing. Instead of thinking about it as something that might turn you bad, it's something that's going to show that you were bad all along. And so in order to prevent that, create a good character, obviously through applying the principles of the Bible everywhere, which is holiness, which is love, which is generosity, which is all the sacrifice and all those other kind of things. And make sure you're keeping those things forefront of mind. And as God gives to you, he sees that you're faithful and that you're not self-centered, self-serving, and he'll give you more. And so you can give more, and he gives you more and you give more. It's kind of like you become a conduit of the wealth of God. Whether that's in riches or in talents or in position or power or whatever it might be, but especially in money, because that's the reason I believe most people don't have a whole lot. One, they don't know anything about money, and they just, they don't know how to save it. They don't know how to spend it. They don't know how to use it. And I'm, I'm talking from experience in my past, especially in my younger life, just not knowing what in the world I'm doing with it and what I should have been doing with it. And they end up in bad situations. And I can tell you, almost every bad situation that I've been in, especially financially speaking, has been due to my own lack somewhere along the line of not thinking about it properly, not considering the downfalls of it, and not using it, not being a good steward, not applying the principles of God's word. And that's the result, really. If anybody was really honest with themselves, they'll tell you that most of the problems in their life, their health problems, their financial problems, their relational problems, all come down to them not applying the principles of God's word, if they're really honest with themselves. And I'm going to be completely honest and open, because this is the Real Life and Godliness podcast, so I am going to be real and say that the majority of my problems and my pains in my life have been self-inflicted. because I didn't put in the principles of God's word. And this is one thing, one idea from money that is not the root of evil itself, but it is a magnifier of evil or good that's already existing. So if you don't have a whole lot, and you're at the bottom and you want to build that kind of wealth that leads to someone else, then start cultivating character rather than trying to chase money. Because as you cultivate character in your life that pleases God, God will see that you're a good steward of what you do have now, the little you may have, and he'll give you more. That's the principle of it. That's the basic principle of the Bible. If someone's faithful in little, he'll also give to them more and more and more. And as you receive more, you become more responsible, because it also says that to whom much is given, much is required. And so that's the other burden you're going to take on. If you don't want to be more responsible to God, then you should not be praying for more wealth, because as you gain wealth, you're going to become more responsible and for things that God calls you to do. And if you're not paying attention, you're not being generous, God will call you into judgment for those things. And maybe you take it all away, because he can do that. And he will, because he loves us and he wants us to do what's right. And if something comes between us, especially money or possessions or power or position or anything else, he's going to take it away. And so cultivate good character in the valley, because when you get to the mountaintop, everybody's going to see it, and it'll be magnified. Whatever you are in real life, it's going to be coming out, and everybody's going to see it. And if it's not good, if it's impure and it ain't right, it's going to cause you to crumble. And that's not what we want. We want to live lives that are generous, that are real, that are holy, so that other people can see the love of Christ even in something as basic as our money. Hopefully that made sense. This has been the Real Life and Godliness Podcast. I am, as always, your host, Pastor Will, and I will see you on the next one.